Moot. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. All names in this story are fictional. Moot. 1A. Open to question, debatable. 1B. Subjected to discussion, disputed. 2. Deprived of practical significance, made abstract or purely academic. Merriam-Webster Dictionary. If I thought law school was stressful, vying for articles was blood sport. All I heard about in the last weeks of law school was who got interviews with which firms and how much money somebody spent on their power suit. I heard descriptions down to the type of stitching found on a lapel. Are you kidding? Triple stitched, Dior or Saint Laurent. That's the only way to go. Did you hear about Jeanette Beardsley? She got straight A's in 4 out of 5 courses. Too bad she's so boring. I heard Laura Strawn's father bought her a Bentley convertible and her articling job. I was dizzy from all the hushed chatter about everyone else's business and was happy for a night out with the most down-to-earth law students I could find. I was only able to find any because of their connection to David, a guy who hung out with me mainly because I had walked him through business law when he was busy girl chasing instead of studying for exams last term. I can't say I made close friends over those 3 soul-effacing years, but I tried. Besides David, there was Vanessa, my first-year moot, or debating partner. She was South Asian, friendly enough, and we were both female, visible minorities, a fact that created an unspoken kinship between people like us at a molecular level. We were drawn to each other like 2 souls traveling on the same narrow shoulder, angling to cross over the thick white line into the fast lane. Vanessa was smart, both academically and in a worldly way that was superior to my pie-in-the-sky tunnel vision. But I found myself distancing myself from her when she told me that she was having an affair with a married man, as if law school wasn't toxic enough. There I was one night having dinner with nice enough people who were not really my friends. We were at the pasta shop, enjoying 3-course meals for $12, a student's night out where we could pretend we were all making a killing on Bay Street and living it up. At the table was David, a West Coaster who declared that Birkenstocks were the brogues of the truly self-assured. Brenda, a scientist who wore her cerebrum like window dressing on her forehead, destined for a career in intellectual property. Trey, a self-described playboy who wished to practice law in the military. And Mark, a real-life playboy from old money who, despite his highbrow status, was actually smart and genuinely friendly. And then there was me. Osler already vowed to sign me, said Mark, a paradox with a muscular frame and vaguely effeminate way of speaking. I will add gratuitously that he was also a vegan. But I'm pretty well stuck. He was characteristically nonchalant. Osler was one of the top 5 firms in Toronto. I wanted to hate him, but didn't. Guys like him just couldn't help but be successful. Money, connections, and brains. Not his fault. As long as I was not dating him, that is. Brenda, the brain, piped in. You're lucky. I have to choose from 3. Blake's, McCarthy, and Bearskins. So far, she added, just in case anyone thought that 3 invitations from top-tier firms was insufficiently impressive. I'm thinking of going off-grid. I'm going for Bearskins. I almost did hate Brenda. Smart, but not that smart, although she would give the impression that she was by all her supercilious articulation and frequent use of scientific terminology as pepper, regardless of context. Her only saving grace was that I could see some genuine insecurity in her, a weakness. I could empathize with weakness. "Shut up, all of you. I got one call and I'm happier than a pig in shit," said David, the West Coaster. "I'm with you, bud," agreed Trey, the military playboy. "I'm glad I don't have to play that game. I'm already in with the military. Corporal de Silva, over and out of here." The military. That was sounding pretty good to me at that moment. I would have rather come face to face with a bazooka than to have to interview. I got 2 calls, one small firm, one mid-sized. I was just relieved I got calls. Despite my knockout debating skills, my grades were decidedly unspectacular. I frankly couldn't think of anything I wanted less than actually working as a lawyer. How I even ended up here was a mystery to me. Who the heck soul searches their way into 5 postgraduate years of pain and debilitating debt? Couldn't I have just backpacked Europe and called it a day? But not getting a call was a fate worse than being told you had a terminal disease. You became an untouchable, a Dalit, destined for a life of damning stigma and even possible ejection from the world of law. No one would touch you with a telescopic pole. At least this is what you think. Death begins in the mind. All eyes looked at me. I shrugged. 2. They nodded. I'd long learned the adage that saying little may make people think you a fool, but saying much only confirmed it. And I'd survived law school by not saying much, except when necessary and only when hyper-prepared. Worse than dreaded interviews were the courting parties called cocktails, where you were expected to hyperventilate with a grin whilst sporting a designer suit that nobody had better touch because it has set you back $1,000 or more, and lick shamelessly the buttocks of anyone whom everyone else is crowding around. Make like a puppy on hind legs, pant vigorously. And if you could navigate a delicate balance between enthusiasm and the calm composure that sent the message that you were in demand elsewhere, "Absolutely a pleasure meeting everyone here, but I must run along down the street, you know. I've promised to McCarthy's I'd pop in a bit to say hello." You got invited to Canoe or North 44, where you wined and dined after the initial sniff. Despite Brenda's advice to go designer, I went to my first cocktail in a simple black suit that my mother made, the fabric for which cost me all of $20. If I were rejected, at least I wouldn't have sold myself out for a suit I didn't want in the first place. A suit hussy. The receptionist was nice, buzzing someone on her intercom to escort me when I arrived. The lobby looked like a hotel more than an office building, the name of the firm carved out in large brass letters behind the desk. In a few minutes, a tall young man arrived at reception to greet me. "Hello," I said, surprised to have such a personal greeting. I was expecting and hoping to sneak in like an undercover agent, tap into a few conversations, then sneak out. That wasn't going to happen. He introduced himself. I was struck by what a nice guy he seemed to be. As predicted, there were many puppies afloat on the 26th floor of 145 King Street West. The air was abuzz with chatter and clinking of glasses. There were suited people conversing, mostly standing in small groups throughout the huge room, flanked by a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows on one end. Along the abutting walls, there were multiple food stations where hors d'oeuvres were being served by white-aproned waiters. Bruschetta, live oysters, charcuterie, and a myriad of cheeses. It was all I could do to not make a beeline for the food and a stiff drink, mostly because I didn't drink. My host graciously made conversation with me. I tried hard to ask some intelligent questions about this and that, but I felt thoroughly disingenuous when, frankly, all I wanted was to get the job, pass the bar, and get my license. Beyond that, "So what makes you interested in our firm?" he asks. Because you called me? I told him generalities. I'd looked up on the internet, dropped a few names of partners at the firm, and told them how much I appreciated the work they did on fill in the blank. What type of practice interests you? I don't know. Leave me alone. I told him litigation, because that's what he did. Mirroring, I'd read, was a good technique to get people to like you. I regretted saying litigation almost as soon as it came out of my mouth, remembering what I'd heard about a lifestyle of a litigator. 80-hour weeks. But I didn't know what else to say. My only really good grades in school were constitutional law and civil advocacy. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I can tell you where I'd like to be in 5 minutes. Right over there, making cozy with those raw oysters, the only ones in the room that seemed to understand my need to crawl into a shell and never come out. I gotta dig deep for this one. I told him that diversifying one's interests early in a career was a sure route to finding one's niche later in life. Forbes. When he thanked me and excused himself, I realized that I'd just been vetted. I stood alone, wondering what to do next. The oysters were calling me, so I moseyed on over there and parked it, downing them quicker than the white-aproned shucker schmuck could shuck 'em, until he gave me a look that said, "Beat it." So I skulked around until I found a group to hover over where I pretended to be interested in what was being said by the person in the middle, presumably someone important. After about 20 minutes feeling stupid, tippy-toeing on the fringes and not hearing a word, clarification, tippy-toeing lasted 20 minutes, feeling stupid much longer, I'd had enough. Was I supposed to stay? I wondered if I was the only person who felt like Woody Allen at a red carpet event. I found a quiet woman standing in a corner with a name tag on it. Would it be all right to leave now? I hoped that sounded like, "Excuse me, but I have a more important cocktail to go to at a much bigger, much better firm, so I must be running along, although I don't want to be rude." But by that time, I just didn't care anymore. I needed to get out of there. She looked surprised by the question, but said, "I think it's all right." I found myself making my obligatory way across town to another firm, a smaller one, specializing in civil litigation and real estate law. Suddenly, I had a pin hollow in my gut that grew into a pea as I approached my destination. By the time I arrived, the hollow pushed the limits of my stomach cavity. "You shouldn't have left that cocktail so soon." You knew it at the time, the smiling young woman, probably an associate, who nodded sympathetically, knew it too. Knew that you'd already decided it was over, that you were not leaving because you'd had enough of champagne and pretense that was beneath you, but because you couldn't handle wanting it so badly that you would have gladly stood around panting like a cocker spaniel, hanging on to every word someone important said, if only you knew it would lead to a shiny job in the sky that you could bring home and say, "Look, Mom, look, Dad, I'm really a lawyer. Little old me, daughter number 5, the one who should have been a boy." You didn't even give it a chance. You took off like a scared teenager from the school dance for fear of not being asked to dance. Now all you have is one firm left. The affair wasn't nearly as elaborate as the first, but I did get to talk to individuals instead of standing around like a spectator of a street show. I was both encouraged and made anxious by this. What if they sniffed me out? A man about 50 years old, fronted by an overbearing handlebar mustache and a shiny bald head, approached me almost immediately as I walked into the modest reception. He introduced himself as Partner X and appeared interested in my inclination towards litigation after a few minutes of casual exchange. But your now finely tuned instincts tell you that that's not all he's interested in. You need not even deploy your more elite, slime-seeking implements to detect his motives, given the indefatigable grin matching his mustache in curve and breadth and salaciousness. Something shifts, like gears on an extraterrestrial machine, effecting a total change in temperature, geography, time, and space in your pent-up psyche. In an instant, you are Omega Woman, survivor of the apocalypse. Without ever harboring a conscious thought, every pore in your being, from the accelerated heartbeat to the microscopic beads of moisture forming around lymph nodes, knows with startling clarity that there is nothing in your arsenal that you will not use to guarantee without a molecule of doubt that this, your last chance, will, as certainly as E equals MC squared, equate to an articling position. You stand, drink in hand, certain you have a captive audience. Partner X leans in. You demur, do not cease to engage. All artillery of feminine guile. Facial mirroring, well-timed hand gestures, unabashed eye contact, emotional quotient on full, flagrant display. He digresses from business and squawks about the dearth of good pubs in the vicinity. You tell him, all sweet Bo Peep, about your preference for home cooking. He jokes about his own lack of culinary prowess. You join him with measured indulgence in his self-effacing laughter. When the conversation finally dances around legal practice, you don't know what he asks you because all your answers are practiced vague and inconsequential. You cannot be specific about your desire to practice law because it doesn't exist. There's little point in trying to sell yourself professionally because all that firms have to gauge ability is your grade point average to which they already have access. The rest is all about fit, that intangible, mysterious quality that is tantamount to defining your caste in the world of private legal practice. Are you a Brahmin or an untouchable? Then a young 30-ish woman sporting a beige suit with colorless spectacles caught my attention, or rather I caught hers. Like a swami approaching a charmed and momentarily disarmed cobra, she arrived by stealth in my vicinity without ever unlatching my hapless gaze. I had the impression that despite her relative youth, she was a serious gun with the clear directive from a higher power to size me up, particularly given the unveiled attention that was being lasered on me by one of the bearers of the firm's name. As she parked her no-nonsense beige two-piece in front of me, I knew that I'd somehow been identified as a person of interest. Unlike partner X, she cut to the chase. She introduced herself as a partner to the firm, a fact that surprised me given that she looked no older than 35. Although direct, she was tactful and managed to wheedle out of me the necessary information to make her assessment of me as both an articling student and as someone with the potential future at their firm. I found myself almost hypnotically candid about my lack of interest in real estate law and leanings towards litigation. I could tell that she had reservations about my candidacy based on her repeated refrain that articling students would have a rotation in all aspects of the firm's business. I realized immediately that I may have been more honest with her than I should have been, but it was too late. I could have hardly helped it. There was an authority and earnestness about her that made me feel like I'd been truth-lassoed by a Wonder Woman and forced, wobbly-kneed, to confess my betrayals. But this time, like all the others, the betrayal has only been against yourself. You can't believe that only minutes earlier, you allowed partner X to practically slobber all over you. You go home disgusted, with no one but yourself. In Toronto, all students must take part in the matching program to find articles. Students and firms ranked their top choices on a ballot that is then put through a computer program that matched them according to their choices. a mysterious process that encouraged students and firms to rank preferences honestly, avoiding the guesswork of how they'd be ranked by their choices. At least, this is what I was told. Even knowing this, I didn't think, what do I want? I thought, which one actually wants me? I got my letter from the Law Society a few weeks later. You have not been matched. It was a few days before I got over the shock. Without my articles, I would not get my license. That and the humiliation. Then I called up the nice partner at the first firm. Of course I remember you. How are you? His voice was genuinely warm, just like how I remembered him. It stabbed me in the gut. Why? Well, it happens to the best of us. Quite honestly, I don't know what happened. But what I can tell you is that you were on our list of first-round draft picks. Then he drove the nail into the coffin. All you had to do was rank us first, and that should have been a done deal. I remember watching a movie called Shogun. How stupid I thought it was when a Japanese warrior disemboweled himself with his own sword after losing a battle. I did not think it was so stupid after all. I had a great first-tier firm in the bag, and I went and cut a hole the size of the Grand Canyon into it. I was in no mood to go through any more interviews. Although I did not ceremonially self-excise my innards, it was time to pack it in. Ring the old bell. Like hell it was. I'd come this far. I was going to finish this freaking long train ride and get my license, even if it killed me. This time, I went to small-town Ontario. I interviewed with 2 young associates, one named Steve, the other Diana. Wonder Woman, I mused. They had a good chuckle when I confessed that constitutional law was my primary interest. After that, I stuck with, I'm open, which at that point was the truth. My favorite food? Indian. Good luck trying to find that here, they say. Music? Country. Bigger chuckle. I liked them. They seemed to like me. We were a fit. If finding articles was blood sport, the practice of law was... Just save it, girl. First, I was the only visible minority in the 75-person law firm. Second, I was possibly the only visible minority in the legal profession in the entire town. At least this was the case in the courthouse on any given day I was there. My early introduction to legal practice consisted of many existential peculiarities. To save you a long-running narrative, too late, I reduced them to an enumerated top 10 list. Number 10, the billable hour. One must keep a docket of how one spends every 1/6 of an hour. It is the running half-joke in the legal community that this includes time spent thinking in the shower or doing personal business. How I fared? I was a disaster. Tantamount to remembering the name of a cocktail, and possibly even worse than reproducing the mysterious maneuvers of pouring a foam-free pitcher. My stint as a waitress for a sports bar is for another story. Epic? Of course. After spending 10 straight hours sitting on my unergonomically supported butt taking instruction that might as well have been in pinyin from frazzled-out lawyers who didn't care that you were but a bewildered widget freshly churned out of an academic factory, I'm sorry that I couldn't freaking remember what I was thinking about in the second sextant of the hexamerous hour. Solution? I start making stuff up to fill up my docket. Number 9, voice memos. Instead of typing out our own letters, we were told to record our thoughts on tape cassettes and give them to secretaries to transcribe. How I fared? It took me approximately 4 times longer to verbally record a memo than it did to type it out myself. How was I supposed to know what the hell I just said if I couldn't see it? The secretaries, harassed by my constant redo requests, were ready to put out a hit on me. Solution? I typed my own letters. My life was spared. Number 8, courtroom etiquette. One is never supposed to turn one's back to the judge. Once you approach the bench, you have to walk backwards until past the gate that separates the bench from the public arena. You are also supposed to address the judge as Your Honor or Your Worship, depending on the court. How I fared? I found all this worshiping disturbing, especially when I later discovered that I didn't like or respect the behavior of some of the men and women who sat on the bench. Solution? I followed etiquette anyway. I was a good girl. Number 7, motions. These are procedural requests made to opposing counsel, which are sometimes contested like a mini-trial. Articling students perform most of these, often being assigned them at the last minute, as in the second I step into the office, bushy-faced, coffee in hand, told with a smile that we had an hour or less to get acquainted with a foot-high file with 0 prior knowledge about the case. Students were always assigned the sure losers, much like second-tier players being called off the bench when the game had already been decided. How I fared? I survived. Thank God for my short-term memory. I carved out context, made necessary presumptions, stuck to key facts. I usually ran into the courtroom, my head so full of stuff that I'd forget I was still wearing sneakers under my black robe. I won some, I lost some. Most were about picking my face up off the floor afterwards, dusting it off while slinking out of the courtroom backwards, ready for the next humiliation. Solution? Suck it up. Number 6, out-of-town real estate closings. Students, most of us carless, were either supposed to rent a vehicle or borrow one from a principal for out-of-town closings. Borrowing saved the firm money, so we were encouraged to do so. Still, I was invariably met with uneasy looks and stern warnings not to smash up their vehicles each time I asked. How I fared? I narrowly escaped smashing up one Porsche 993 Turbo. I now know why it was called Turbo, and did not escape scratching the living heck off the top of a Ford Ram Special Edition pickup. Read expensive. When I entered a low-bearing parking garage. Solution? I didn't tell my principal. He was short and fat and would never see the top of the truck anyway. For the remainder of my articling year, I felt like someone who had committed involuntary manslaughter, mentally practicing my alibi whenever I had passed by his office. Further challenges included staying awake on long afternoon drives, my nap time, and knowing where the heck I was going. Did I mention I'm directionally challenged? Armed only with a paper map. This is the 90s. One pair of eyes and a wristwatch that counted down the minutes before the title office closed when I and our client would be poop out of luck. On one occasion, time ran out. I was poop out of luck. Back at the office, I gotten more poop. Solution: not applicable. Number 5, law firm parties. Everyone got drunk, and you were given a plastic wristband to ensure that you could do so entirely at the firm's expense when you went to the annual party at the local pub. Good lawyers worked hard and played hard, so the drunker you got, the better a lawyer you were. You would fit in. How I fared? I went to the gym. The next day, I heard stories about Diana, the quiet associate, who was groped by Stuart, a partner. I was glad I went to the gym. Olive branch. I made amends by bringing inebriation to new heights at the firm's holiday extravaganza. It was an event at which articling students traditionally performed a skit, comfortably and giddily anesthetized by alcohol. I elicited thigh-slapping laughter when I parodied myself trying to figure out what to do with a beer, first blowing at it like a musical instrument, then attempting to kung fu chop it. I received more accolades for my Saturday Night Live-esque performance than for anything I'd ever done as a lawyer. Number 4, judges. Some of them were really, really old. Most of them couldn't remember the meaning of certain legal terminologies, especially Latin ones from law school, such as nunc pro tunc. How I fared? I used the aforementioned term in one motion for which, surprise, I'd had no time to prepare. I had vague knowledge that it had some relevance to the context, so I spit it out like an expletive, because I didn't know what the heck else to say. So I went out on a limb to sound like I did. The geriatric judge looked at me quizzically, then, not knowing what to say either, granted me the motion. In my peripheral, opposing counsel glanced at me, then the judge. 3 pairs of eyes trying to avoid each other in our mutual, denied dubiety. It was the most colossal fake-out I'd ever pulled and got away with. Lesson: when you're all out of arguments, speak Latin. Number 3, a win is not a win unless you get paid. There is no such thing as a win in principle. If you did not make money for the firm by way of billable hours, you were a nothing, a nobody, a less than a nobody, a scavenger, parasite, scum of the earth. How I fared? Just call me scum. I spent innumerable hours fighting a small claims case for a woman in a personal injury claim. I did this partly because I preferred hiding in my office, writing legal memos, instead of meeting scary people like my clients. Result? I ended up winning on principle. Yay! But my client was awarded only nominal damages. Translation: firm didn't get paid. Boo. Number 2, legal practice in a smallish town. Be ready for bias. In a small claims case, I met a handsome young lawyer representing himself who just so happened to be part owner of the bar that our client was suing for damages. This sounds like a great start to a romantic novel, doesn't it? Indeed, I received daily phone calls from said lawyer bar owner, but not with invitations to wine and dine me, rather to warn me, a mere peon articling student, to drop the case for lack of evidence. He did this daily, leading up to the court case. I swear this guy must have studied the art of sleaze. When I finally met him in court, he did not disappoint. He spent the first 5 minutes telling the relatively young female judge how lovely she looked, to which, I swear, she visibly shot petals sprinkled with spring rain out of her honorable backside. Then the drama unfolded. She inquired sweetly about his new business in town, the business that was the defendant in the case, and the two of them went on to spend the next few minutes engaged in a surreal personal interchange that left no doubt in my mind, or the mind of any sane person watching, that this would be anything but an impartial court. On day 1 of the trial, every single one of my objections were overruled by the judge, whose voice audibly changed whenever addressing me into the pinched hissing a balloon makes when air is released from it. This also happened on day 2. When I asked my principal to accompany me to witness what I believed was blatant bias, she told me nonchalantly, "Yep, she hates you." For trial results, refer to peculiarity number 8 above. Headnote summary. I lost. And finally, number 1. Legal practice in a smallish town. 2. Some days you will think you are being punked. Or back in the old days, we called this candid camera. Exhibit A. I was taking notes in court for my principal during a criminal trial, open to the public. An elderly woman, who I noticed had been observing me for a long while, leaned in from the back row behind me, inquiring, "Sweetheart, are you studying law to go back to your country to help your people?" Solution. Go laugh about it over bubble tea with your Asian people. Back home in Toronto, that is. All this is to say that I finally did get my license. Barrister, solicitor, and notary public. I am official. Legit. The real deal. The road has been long and not without sacrifice, but I have no regrets. The world needs me. When my son says his sister made him do it, I alert him to the inadmissibility of hearsay. When my husband dares to defend himself during an argument, I hasten to remind him that anything he says can and will be used against him in future smackdowns. When that guy down the street decides to let his dog do its business on my lawn, I mouth the word trespass as he passes by my window. When a police officer tickets me for rolling at a stop sign, I smugly hint that I'll be asking for disclosure in traffic court. And if ever I find myself on a train or plane that's being hijacked by terrorists and the CIA needs someone on the inside, I can confidently declare there's nothing to fear. I'm a lawyer. Epilogue. The author has since found Jesus and is now saving the world by cross-examining errant teenagers in high school, sharing the good news, and writing stories.